Welcome, my name is Quetzal, and I remind people of who they've always been through timeless teachings and practices that are intertwined with nature. Today, I'm making a follow-up video to a reel that I made. It's talking about what does it mean to be wild. So, if you've seen the video, if you've seen the reel, I got a lot of comments, and before that, I had made another video called Wild versus Domesticated, talking about how the pig in one generation can basically rewild itself. And so I got a lot of comments. That video kind of went viral and got a lot of comments, a lot of people not understanding what this all means, and a lot of positive feedback as well. But I think that, like a lot of things, everybody has their own interpretation, their own meaning of a lot of things, of a lot of terms. And sometimes we don't go and just look at the basic meaning of certain things, right? So for the term wild, this term is a biological term, right? I wasn't saying it in terms of how people say like, oh, that's wild, or like, oh, you did that, that's wild. Because a lot of people, when they hear the word wild, that's what they think about. No, I was using like a biological term. So in biology, when you're looking at species, when you're looking at anything, it could be a plant or animal, it could be any organism, you can classify it under different classifications, right? And so domestication is a process where humans take organisms and change their expression. We select for traits, we change the environment, we might breed them in certain ways to fit what we want them to do, right? That's the process of domestication. Wild is an organism that is existing in its natural environment without human intervention, that is only being molded and shaped evolutionarily through time by the elements, by nature, and through that process. And it's not like a being is consciously coming in and making all these alterations to it. So that's kind of the two classifications when we're talking about wild versus domestic. So if you're a wild organism, that means that you're sovereign. And this is important because like a lot of the plants that we've domesticated, a lot of the crops that we domesticated, they need human intervention in order to thrive, in order to survive and do well. But a wild organism is in its natural environment and it can survive regardless of human intervention. It's genetically built and designed to withstand on its own. It has its certain level of sovereignty where it can reproduce, it can find food, nutrients, whatever it needs to survive within itself. So I wanted to make that distinction that a lot of us have become domesticated humans. We are domesticated humans. We were born into a domesticated system. And so we a lot of times lack the knowledge, the awareness, and even the ability to be able to provide these things for ourselves. So we get water provided for us, we get food provided for us, we get shelter provided for us. We're born into a reality where all this stuff is provided by somebody else. And so when we're talking about becoming wild again, there's all these aspects that we need to look into, and we need to figure out, well, how do I provide that for myself? How do I find water? Like, what is food? Where does food come from? How do I acquire all of that, right? So yeah, that's the clarification that I wanted to make about what it means to be wild, because it is a biological term, but I think it does have impact on how you see the world and how you perceive and move throughout your life. I think there is a psychological component to it, but this is mostly pointing and resting to the fact that we depend on the government, we depend on the systems for so much of our life that we have no idea what it takes to be alive and exist without the help of civilization, without the help of society. So domestication isn't for, hey, I see you, Sonny. I'll let you in a bit. Let me just get this real quick. Domestication isn't for the being that is being domesticated. It's not for the interests of the being that's being domesticated. Domestication is for the thing that domesticates it. So humans domesticated plants and animals not for their benefit necessarily, but for our benefit. We wanted them to be a certain way, to look a certain way, to taste a certain way. So we, through the process of selection, and now we're getting into more advanced techniques like genetic engineering, but this is all to select a organism or to create an organism that benefits what we want and that does what we want it to do. So this has nothing to do with what the organism wants for itself, because once you become domesticated, you lose the ability to exist within your own accord, right? And some animals and some organisms can reintegrate back into nature, and they can, like somebody said, become feral again and start, living with the land and just being in communion with the natural cycles of life. But a lot of them can't. A lot of them, like if you try to plant certain things, they're just going to die out because they need that constant watering. They need that nutrition. They need the soil. Their roots can't go deep enough to access certain nutrients. Like there's all kinds of shortcomings that are created through the process of domestication, even in our own body. And I'll give you some examples of how humans anatomically and physically have changed because we've been domesticated. So for once, we can start with the teeth, right? Why do you get your wisdom teeth removed? Why isn't there enough room for all your teeth on your jaw? That's because through the process of domestication, there's many theories to this, and also many components. One of them being, people say we're not chewing enough because we're getting all this soft food that's already processed, so we don't have to chew. But also another component is the nutrition. If you don't get enough nutrition in that developmental phase of your life, your bones, your anatomy doesn't fully develop. And one of the things that doesn't fully develop is your jaw. So you literally have less room in your jaw for the same amount of teeth. So what happens is, as your teeth start growing in and your wisdom teeth are coming in, they start to crowd, they start to push against one another. And that's when people have to have their wisdom teeth removed, because they literally don't have enough room on their jaw. Like does this sound like something that nature would produce out of natural design, like a flaw like this? So this is one of the byproducts of domestication. But also, if you look at cultures, there's a culture in the Philippines and Malaysia. They're divers and they do spearfishing and they dive underwater. Their spleens are 50% bigger than regular person's spleens, because they've had to adapt to that environment, and they've had to be able to go underwater. They could hold their breath for like 13 minutes long. So their spleen is actually a different size than if you just took a civilized person off the street, or a regular person, right? Another example is the feet. The feet, right? So most people, they got feet that's crowded because of our shoes. They're crowding our feet, right, and our toes. So this is pushing the toes inward. So the shape of the foot becomes like this shape. But the actual shape is supposed to be like this. It's supposed to point outwards in a V shape, like a duck foot shape. And so because we wear shoes, that's pushing our feet in. And if you look at some of the cultures, like in the Amazon, the ones that climb the trees and stuff, and they're running and grabbing onto the roots with their feet, you should look at their feet. They do not look nothing like regular person's feet. They're kind of splayed out and spaced out, and they have the ability to curl and pick up things with your feet, things that you or the common person and we can't do because we were born into an environment that was from domestication. Or like that pig that hasn't grown its tusks, because we live in an environment that doesn't require us to have tusks. We live in an environment that babies and nurtures us and gives us everything that we need, so that we don't have to develop physically into the being that we're supposed to be, or that we're capable of being fully, right? So those are just a couple of examples off the top of my head that I can think of as far as our physical anatomy and appearance, and how that differs from people who are actually living off the land, who are actually living in nature, who are actually asking from their body and expressing what it was designed to do and to express. So this is what I'm talking about with the wild versus domestication piece. It's much more than just saying like, oh, I'm wild, I'm this. No, it's actually goes down to a genetic expression level, to where And a component of it is the mental, right? Like, is being who you are, is being authentic, being real, and being transparent with who you are, and saying what you think, and expressing what you are, like not holding back because people have a certain perspective of you, or because you want people to like you. But this kind of goes back to being sovereign. Like, the reason a lot of people care is because the people that hold their resources is somebody else. Like, somebody else is giving you food, so you got to think about your job. You can't say the right shit because your job could get taken away. You can't say certain shit because your social media get taken down. There's all these things that are like incentivizing you to not express yourself. They're trying to suppress your true expression and quell your wildness. They want you to be domesticated, because in a domesticated state, you're a tool for the system. You can be of service to the system of civilization. You will bow down and serve whatever agenda that this civilization has created. But in your wild state, you can provide that for yourself. I can go out here and give food. I can go out here and build a shelter. I can go out here and harvest water. I don't need the system. So why do I have an incentive to bow down to the system? So when you tap into that part of yourself, you start tapping into something that is less useful and of utility to the system that's trying to harness your power. They're trying to harness your capability. This whole thing relies on other people to live in their domesticated state for it to keep going. And so when we're talking about wow, we're not talking about chaos, because before human domestication, there was still humans that were existing harmoniously in their wild state. They were just moving, looking, and being differently. They were being what they were supposed to be. Was the world perfect and without any sort of disputes? Of course not. That's a fallacy. That's just part of life. But what they weren't doing is suppressing what they truly were, or suppressing what they truly wanted to say. What they weren't doing is not peeing outside because they live in a society that doesn't understand that what comes out of your body is fertilizer for the trees and plants, and that they demonize your body and its natural state because they hypersexualize how you look in your natural original skin. That's why they created all these things, because they don't understand that how life is organically designed is in harmony. Like, they want to stop that process. So anything that hints at the reality that you integrate seamlessly with your natural environment, they want to block that. So you getting too much sun on your skin, they want to block that. What do they encourage all the time? Sunblock, 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 sunblock. Put on sunblock. The sun is evil. Wear as much clothing as you can. Your natural naked state is inherently perverted, and you should try to always cover up as much as possible. Anything that can hint at your wild state is going to be suppressed. Oh, there's no roles. Men and women are exactly the same. Everybody's exactly the same, and there's absolutely no differences between me, you, or anybody that we can observe. Like, they want to like block out any signs of what makes us us, and they want to homogenize society into a assembly line of robots that can just do as they please and serve the system of civilization without any backlash. And they just want people who are going to fall into that. So when people come in and they got a strict something that goes against that, you're going to see them get canceled. You're going to see them get taken down. You're going to see their videos removed because they're saying a message that goes against the agenda of the system. And at this point, the system has recruited enough people that either consciously or subconsciously are servants to the system, and they don't even know it. They're pushing these agendas, and they think that they're doing something good for the earth. They think they're doing something good for humanity. They think that they're helping women out by pushing this feminist movement, but in fact, they're actually generating the opposite type of response that they're wanting. Because in nature, there's roles. In nature, there's female and male, and males do certain things and females do certain things. Now, this doesn't mean that our value or that one of them is higher than the other, but it does mean that we have to recognize the biological differences so that we can understand. Because, and this is what they don't understand, in order to not identify with anything, you have to identify something. So you have to know this is this and this is this. I don't identify with either, right? Because that's what people are saying. I'm non-binary. Well, you have to recognize what these two things are in order to know that you do not resonate with them. So unless we're willing to look at what these two things are and say, yeah, this is how this is and this is how this is, we can create a distinction between them and then decide if we fall into either category, decide if we were born into a body that aligns with that. But we have to distinguish. We have to be able to distinguish, because the opposite of not being able to distinguish, or the opposite of being able to distinguish, is homogenization, where we can't distinguish. Everything's the same. There's no differences, not that I can see here. You could be whatever you want. That sounds cool and it sounds good, but is that in alignment to reality? And is that in alignment to what we're trying to achieve? And is that in alignment to the type of life that we're trying to live? Like, nature lives off of diversity. It thrives off diversity. The reason that nature is able to propagate is because there is diversity. Even within organisms and species, there are different varieties of those species. You might have a pineapple, but then you might have a same species, but a different variety that is slightly different, maybe more capable in certain terrains and certain localized ecologies to be able to survive in case that other one doesn't make it. So there's all these components that is creating differentiation in nature. When you try to make all that the same, that's monocropping. That's GMOs. That's planting a whole field of just one organism, of just one crop, monocropping it. That's not how nature works, and that's not how nature thrives. So the fact that they're going into this is just a symbolic representation of what they're doing with the earth, of what they're doing with everything else on this planet. They're just trying to coalesce it into one and to erase distinctions so that there's no self-identity. Because if you don't have an identity, well, you can just adopt the identity that they give you, and therefore you can just be utilized, basically. So that's just the whole range of wild to domestication. And the more you go to the domesticated process and the more you embrace that, the more you're going to find these ideologies to be more prevalent. And the more you go wild, the less you give a fuck about what people think, the more you're going to speak your mind. I don't care if the whole world thinks X, Y, and Z. This is what I think, and I'm going to share what I think, because this is my right as a sovereign being to express myself fully, authentically, transparently, and I don't care if somebody doesn't agree, because that doesn't matter, because I'm in my sovereign state to be able to express myself. And the thing is, there's so many people that agree with so many things that people are withholding, that we make it seem like nobody agrees because everybody's scared to speak up and share the thing that we're all afraid to say. But really, there's a bunch of people that are agreeing with you and that see things how you see it, but because you don't share it, because you've suppressed yourself, it seems like there's only a few people, there's only a few voices, but really there's a lot of voices, just that they're not being spoken, they're not being articulated. And so the loudest voices are coming from a select group of minorities that's really adamant, and they're really activists for whatever they believe, and I think that's part of why our perception on reality is so warped, because we're getting a very small population who's the loudest and is making it seem like that's what everybody believes, but it's not. Because when you go on videos and that's why they're taking down the videos, because they don't want to see 100,000 likes on a video that's talking about biological realities. They don't want to see a bunch of comments of people agreeing on these biological realities, because then that kind of shines a light on the fact that there is people who agree. So the more they suppress this content, the more it seems like the world is agreeing with this agenda. But we know that's not the case. We know a lot of people agree. But what's important is that we just express ourselves, that we just share what we think. And none of what I speak comes from hate. It just comes from alignment to myself and my beliefs. I believe that people have sovereignty to believe what they want and to express what they want. I would not take that from anybody, because I don't want that taken from me. I might, just like I might say things that might offend somebody. I might see shit that might offend me, but that's not justification to block that or to cancel that or to do none of that, because then we create a generation of people who are fake. They don't express themselves. They don't say what's on their mind. They just become yes men, but then deep down inside, like, they actually think something different. And I don't want to be an advocate for that. I'm not going to advocate for that. I'm an advocate for transparency, for authentic self-expression. Even if the whole world is saying something different, I'm going to say what I think. And so that's the wild message.